Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. Today is August 2nd, 2023. There's a lot going on this week, and there's a lot to discuss. I've had to try to distill what I want to talk about today because I could literally go on for hours, but there's just too much work to do, too many phone calls to return, emails to return, etc. By the way, I've whittled the list down to about 15 to 20 people that have contacted us this week, and I've not yet gotten back to you, but that is exactly what I will be doing right after this call. So I appreciate your patience. We're doing the best we can for obvious reasons. The phone lines and the emails are blowing up, and I'm doing my best to respond to all of this. As a matter of fact, my family's at the beach this week, and I'm still sitting here at home because there's no way I could take a vacation the first couple of weeks in August, given what's going on. For those of you calling in for the first time, if you like the things we discuss on this call, I would invite you to subscribe to these calls and share them with other like-minded individuals. We're going to try to get through a full call here today. My phone's going to blow up, and it's always annoying when I'm trying to talk on the phone and these things keep popping up, people trying to contact you. After nearly 15 years of doing Wednesday calls, you would think people would realize that, but I know that, when things are going on, they're not really thinking about exactly what day and exactly what time it is, and I understand that. So let's go ahead and get started. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information we believe to be most relevant. Now, last week I talked about a window that had begun as early as July 1st going through to August 15th. Now, that window existed for me for two reasons. First, we always want to see a reinstitution and revaluation in the first half of a quarter, which allows us to hold the currencies if it comes out of the low float and let it appreciate. And by occurring in the first half of a quarter, we don't have to worry about taxes until the 15th day of the first month of the next quarter. So we're still looking at a window ending on August 15th, and I'll get into the reasons why I think that's still a possibility for the reinstitution in country. First, release of budget instructions is scheduled for this week, so hopefully that information will come out. A lot of information has already creeped out, but it would be a very good omen if the instructions were released, although my understanding, and I'll get into it, is the instructions are in the possession of the directors of the Central Bank of Iraq. I want to first touch on the naysayers, and they exist, why they say that the reinstitution of the Iraqi dinar is either years out or may never happen. First, we have the crowd that says it can never happen because of the money supply. There's just too much currency out there. Well, in my opinion, the currency that's out there is the provisional 3-0 currency, and by collecting as much of that as they can and then deleting the 3 zeros and releasing the new national currency dramatically reduces the money supply out there. So I'm kind of concerned that people that talk about the money supply talk about the dinar as though it's a functional global currency, which it is not. They're dealing with a currency in a program rate, the functional 3-0 currency. So as far as I'm concerned, that currency doesn't count as legitimate money supply, not until they complete the process of the deletion of the zeros and the issuance of the new currency. The second issue that's brought up is the economics. They continually bring up the fact that the economy of Iraq is transitioning to a private economy. They've got to build their import and export business. They've got to diversify beyond the sale of oil. I don't disagree with all of that. Where I differ here is that, in my opinion, the only way to facilitate all of that is with their own currency. At present, Iraq has about $150 billion in USD reserve currency, which may be the largest amount of USD reserve they've ever had. But they also just passed a 3-year budget. They have also signed contracts with other countries for the building of their infrastructure. They've also signed memorandums of understanding with regard to expenditures. There's no way that $115 billion of USD comes even close to accommodating all of that. So they are either going to reinstitute their currency, have a new national currency, a functional global currency, or they're going to be in default in these agreements. There's no middle ground. So the economics argument doesn't really fly, in my opinion, either. But the last argument that they make does make sense, and that's the issue of corruption. And the corruption is coming basically, in my opinion, from two sources, from Iran itself and from the pro-Iranian officials and merchants in Iraq. That's the substance of what Soudani is dealing with. I'm going to digress for a moment because what's going on in Iraq right now is merely the most recent iteration of the dysfunction in the Middle East. Now, for centuries, there's been sectarian issues between the Shia and the Sunni, and both of them have taken turns beating up on the Kurds. But what's going on in Iraq right now is based very simply on hegemony coming from Iran. And I want to just briefly touch on the history of Iran. Iran is a modern nation state, but for thousands of years, it was known as Persia. It had a great history. But for some reason, they lost their way. In the 1930s, after Hitler took power, the Iranians became allies of Nazi Germany. And they went so far as to change their name from Persia to Iran, which seems like a peculiar thing. This occurred in March of 1935. Iran in Farsi means Aryan. They're associating themselves with Nazi Germany because they are Aryans. Now, the Iranian mullahs are very radical. As a matter of fact, they're called 12th Imamers. If you have a few moments, Google 12th Imamer and see what the Iranian mullahs believe. And frankly, in my view, it's rather frightening. But there's more than a sectarian issue with Iran. Iran basically is thumbing its nose at its brown, Arab, and black Islamic brethren. As a matter of fact, the term Caucasian came from the Caucasus mountain range in Iran. So the Iranian mullahs are not only radical Shia, but they look down at their brethren because they're basically being racist about it. They're saying we're superior in our beliefs and in our race. So this is why they have no problem interfering in neighbor nations, whether they happen to be Islamic or not. And corruption is the problem. We have corrupt speculators that are using the multiple currency system with the parallel rate in Iraq to arbitrage and to pilfer and make profits that way. We have the coalition framework, at least the radical factions of the coalition framework, still trying to stop or at least postpone the reinstitution through chaos, complaints to the Federal Supreme Court, and the like. We have Iranian merchants that are still trying to utilize the USD. And this is frankly what caused the temporary spike in the value of the USD against the US dollar. We even have Iranian shell companies trying to smuggle both the US dollar and the IQD out of Iraq. They want to smuggle the US dollar out because they want to weaken the economy, which is still working on the US dollar, and because they want to utilize the US dollar themselves. They're trying to smuggle the IQD out with the expectation that when it does reinstitute and revalue globally, they're going to be able to take advantage of that theft as well. But Soudani, the prime minister, is doing everything he can to nullify these attempts. He's also working with Barzani, the president of Kurdistan. And one of the strategies of the coalition framework and the radical Shia is to make sure that that wedge between Kurdistan and Baghdad remains in force. But they've failed at that utterly, because now Barzani, president of Kurdistan, and Soudani, the prime minister of Iraq, have come to agreement on the budget, the hydrocarbon law, Article 140, the Constitution, the Kurds' dues to Baghdad, the payment of salaries, the banking reforms, and the proportionate distribution of profit from the sale of petroleum. Soudani's been a very busy guy. He's also had meetings not only with Barzani, but with the U.S. Treasury, the United States ambassador, the government of Kuwait to resolve a number of issues, as well as Germany and Italy with regard to their infrastructure projects. But I want to touch on Kuwait for a second, because if you're ambivalent about where this is all going with the Iraqi dinar, let's take a look at Kuwait. The Kuwaiti dinar is probably the strongest currency against the U.S. dollar globally right now. It takes $3.25 USD to equal one Kuwaiti dinar. Now, it's true that Kuwait does make money in oil and in water, but the real money they make is as a global export because of their location on the Persian Gulf. All of the Middle East oil that flows globally goes through the Persian Gulf, leaving the port of Kuwait. But despite that, the wealth of Iraq utterly dwarfs that of Kuwait. So if the Kuwaiti dinar is worth $3.25 today, who can plausibly argue that the Iraqi dinar would not be worth $3.25 or more? One other point. One of the things Soudani recently reiterated is the activation of Article 304 of the Constitution, which protects the value of the dinar from corrupt currency manipulation. So everything's moving in the right direction. Soudani, there are three individuals that I think are critical to what's going on here. Soudani, the Prime Minister of Iraq, Barzani, President of Kurdistan, and the directors of the central bank along with the LOC. And what have these people accomplished? Well, Soudani has reversed the U.S. sanctions on Iraqi banks. He's warned the corrupt Iranian officials and the media to stop lying about the progress of the monetary reform. He's conducted massive arrests of those that are either utilizing the dollar or involved in currency manipulation. Just this week, Soudani sent a package with quote-unquote major changes to the directors of the CBI. Now, the language that was used was not important changes, it was major changes. In my view, the only thing today that constitutes a major change is ending the multiple currency system and the difference between the official rate of the dinar and the parallel rate, and the reinstitution of the dinar and release of the new national currency. Iraq has also sent a delegation to visit the U.S. Treasury regarding the exchange rate. Now, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever if Iraq is going to remain with a program rate. The only thing that makes sense for a delegation to travel to Washington, D.C. to discuss the exchange rate is if there's going to be a change in the exchange rate. Another issue of importance is currently Iraq's been flooded with new bank accounts. Now, these bank accounts are being established not without cause. There's a reason why all of a sudden money is flowing to these banks. One of the reasons is Iraqi citizens who have been distrustful in the past have been hoarding the 3-0 provisional currency. But in order to accumulate the new national currency, which they have been promised, they're going to need to place the 3-0 provisional currency in the bank. They also need, with the new electronic platform, they need to have bank accounts for the payments of salaries and for retirement pay. In addition, the new electronic platform is designed to track the flow of the provisional 3-0 IQD. We hear all the time about the deletion of the zeros. The deletion of the zeros very simply means that once the dinar reinstitutes in country, if an Iraqi national walks into a bank with a 3-0, say $10,000 note, it's a 10 dinar note, not a 10,000 dinar note. The 3 zeros have been deleted. But before they get to that point, they want to do everything they can to collect the 3-0 provisional notes. So the deletion would only affect the provisional 3-0 currency in the possession of Iraqi nationals after they've reinstituted. It will not affect those of us who purchased the 3-0 notes in order to assist Iraq, going back as far as 20 years. Now, given all of that information, I want to give you my opinion, my thoughts on where exactly we are with the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar. How's this going to work? As I've said, I think it can happen very quickly. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if. It's just a matter of when. We've gone into Basel. We've gone into transition through the 5 Basel phases. We've discussed Basel IV, where we are now. We've discussed the wealth of Iraq, and Basel compliance and determines the value of the currency. Basel's based on the known natural resources in a country and their ability to bring those resources to market. Iraq may be, per square mile, the richest country in the world, and they're working very hard to be able to bring those resources to market. So the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar are a done deal in the sense that they're going to happen, and despite the best efforts of Iranians, pro-Iranian officials, and others, they're not going to be able to stop what's happening. So we're looking at a float at about 1-to-1. I used to assume that the dinar would have to be at a premium over the dollar in order to reinstitute, but given the de-dollarization involved, all the dinar needs to do is be at a rate of 1-to-1 with the dollar. Now, when that happens, the dinar would then be on the Forex floated at that price of, let's say, 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar. Now, some still maintain that there are going to be incremental increases at that point, and it could take a couple of years to get back to, say, the 322, which is what the dinar was worth when it went into a program rate. In my opinion, and if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say so, I think that's utterly absurd for 2 reasons. Number one, let's look at what happened with the Kuwaiti dinar. The Kuwaiti dinar came back after being in a program rate. I believe it was $3.46, as I recall, thereabouts. But within a matter of weeks, it was up over $7. This is due to a phenomenon called momentum. It happens in the stock market. It happens in all markets. As an example, in the stock market, you have something called an IPO, initial purchase option. A stock comes on the exchange. people just start buying it. It's a new stock. They want to get in on the deal. And so the stock increases substantially in value. Most often than not, this growth is synthetic. It's not organic. It's not real. And so what happens? The stock drops back to a legitimate equilibrium price. That's what happened with the Kuwaiti dinar, which went from $3.46 north of $7 back down to $3.46. Actually, more people lost money than made money because people were buying the Kuwaiti dinar at $4, $5, $6, and $7. 2 weeks later, it's at $3.46. Well, I don't see the Iraqi dinar, based on the underlying known natural resources of that country and the growth of the private sector and all of the international contracts for building its infrastructure, I can't see the dinar at $1 on the Forex taking 2 years to get to 322. If I had to choose between 2 years and 30 days, I go with 30 days. In my opinion, that's where we are. So if you are the holder of an Iraqi dinar, and most of you that are have had dinar for quite some time, you know that what's going on right now has never happened before. We felt good back in 2012, 2014, a couple of years ago, things were moving in the right direction. But the people, for their own selfish political reasons, were able to forestall it. But Sudani, Barzani, and Alak are not going to be denied this time, in my opinion. They are plugging all the holes. They are slapping down all of the people, whether it's civil or criminal, that are trying to shut this thing down. I just think the genie's out of the bottle. There's no way it can be stopped. Now, Trusts Unlimited established our Family Asset Protection Trust package and marketed it to Dinarians because we understood that Dinarians, by and large, are middle-class American citizens who, for the first time in their life, will have to deal with the daunting task of managing a substantial amount of wealth that they received overnight. We will receive this blessing overnight, but we have had currency for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So we've been in anticipation of this for quite some time. And that gives us time to do some serious planning. So I want to talk about the benefits of our Family Asset Protection Trust package and why we created it. I would also say that over the last 20 years, there's another reason, aside from the wealth that we will achieve from the exchange of this currency, and it's the high-tax, high-surveillance state that the United States has become. I frankly don't even recognize our country right now. And because of the genius of the founders, we can pump the brakes and reverse course. And I think that we will. But that's a national issue. What we're talking about now is how you can personally protect yourself from these lying kleptocrats that seem to be in charge right now. And I don't shy away from saying it. You know, people get on, make comments and things like that. And it's child's play to shut them down because what's going on right now is absolutely reprehensible in this country. There's absolutely no defense for it. The hypocrisy, the lies are beyond belief. But the fact that it's occurring is not. This is what the founders understood. This is what the founders lived through. As a matter of fact, after the Constitution was signed, someone walked up to Benjamin Franklin and said, "What have you given us?" And he looked back and said, "A constitutional republic if you can keep it," making it clear that tyranny will always exist, and there are those that simply must have control, not only of their own lives, but of the lives of everyone to their left and to their right. So we have to do everything we can to ensure that their business is their business and our business is our business. Our trust package is basically the statement I would make is, I don't want to run anyone's life. I don't care what anyone has or does. But what this trust is going to say when I explain it is very clearly, leave me alone. Leave my family alone. Let us manage our affairs in peace and mind your own damn business. That's what this trust package is, and I'm going to review with you why I say these things. By establishing this trust, and I strongly suggest you do it before the revaluation, and I'll explain that as well. By establishing our trust package, you will preserve your privacy and your anonymity. That's because things within this trust package are sealed. The general public will have no knowledge of your net worth or your actual holdings. Second, by establishing this trust package, you're going to avoid personal IRS scrutiny, not only in general, but with regard to this revaluation. After this revaluation, if the IRS decides to do an audit, they're going to audit your trust. They're not going to audit you because that is where the wealth was established. The IRS likes to do 6-year audits to make it extremely cumbersome and expensive for you. But in the case of the trust, they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself, and that's easily explained. The third reason you'd want to establish this trust is if you are denarian and you have made the decision to gift family and friends to assist them and to share some of your blessing, this trust has a very unique, within the package, a very unique trust. It's a gifting subtrust. This allows you to gift currencies to friends and family, avoid the federal gift tax, but allow you to manage, invest, and distribute the money to these individuals. So if there are individuals that you're hesitant for any reason to give them a substantial lump sum, you can still give them the money, but you can give it to them through the subtrust, which you manage. Fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is because it allows your estate to avoid the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. Probate ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months, but that subjects your estate to scrutiny of the public, which is what you're trying to avoid. The federal estate tax can be as much as 65% of your estate in excess of approximately $10 million. However, if your currencies in your net worth are in this trust, you'll not only avoid probate, but you'll avoid the federal estate tax entirely. The federal estate tax will be zero, saving as much as 65% of your estate for your heirs. And lastly, this trust provides specific asset protection benefits both pre- and post-RV. Pre-RV, the trust allows you to circumvent the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. You can only be sued for what you actually own in direct title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an asset like our trust package. So as an example, you have 10 million dinar, you pay $10,000 for it, transfer it to the trust. Let's say it revalues for $1. Now it's worth $10 million. You can't be sued for $10 million. You could only be sued for $10,000, assuming he did something that you could be sued for anyway. But you could only be sued for $10,000 because that's all the currencies were worth at the time you transferred them to the trust. Post-RV, there's a benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop loss. This protects you from future bad acts. This protects you from a legal strategy called segregation of assets. This is why we've established a package of trusts. So after the revaluation, when you purchase, say, a larger home, vacation home, rental properties, cars, boats, etc., each of the assets is put in a separate individual subtrust. So if any of those assets get entangled in litigation, it's only the asset in that trust that would be involved in the litigation. The other assets and your net worth are in the other subtrusts, which under the law are separate legal entities or persons having nothing whatsoever to do with the litigation. And lastly, after the revaluation of the dinar and you've established your trust bank accounts, you will be able, there are strategies to circumvent the central bank digital currency. Now, that's not a done deal yet, but it's moving forward. If, in fact, we are subjected to the central bank digital currency, we can establish accounts in different states which have created their own state digital currency. It is a digital currency, but because it's a state digital currency and not the central bank digital currency, there is no credit score system and there's no control of your money. So these are all of the things that can be accomplished with the establishment of a trust, and it looks like the time is running short to establish your trust prior to the reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar. Now, our trust package was initially created and utilized for our more affluent clients. It had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But when we decided to work with dinarians, we knew that price tag was going to be unaffordable for too many. So by marketing the trust to the general public, at least to dinarians, and simplifying the package, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. There are a number of ways you can pay for that. Pay us up front. We'll discount the price further to $2,500. That's not possible. We do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which some would offset our initial cost just to produce and deliver your trust package to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. There would be no interest included. The only proviso is once the dinar revalues globally, any unpaid balance would need to be paid within 30 years. So with this approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and their trust in place pre-RV should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than the payment you would make under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you, because our objective is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust in force before the revaluation globally of the dinar for all of the reasons that we've mentioned here today. So I will be going to a Q&A. Again, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to our call. Again, if you're newer callers, I hope you will subscribe to our calls and share them with other like-minded individuals. I'm going to go ahead and open the Q&A now. Before I take any calls, I want to just tell you a little bit about Trusts Unlimited and why you should seriously consider contacting us to get our initial no-obligation package. Our trust was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas now for 40 years. I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstatement of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have over 80 years' experience working precisely in this area. It's important to understand that under our system of civil procedure, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them. And invariably, it's at precisely those times in life that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are, of course, investment losses, business losses, and even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth in the aggregate today, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So the only way that you can credibly manage, protect, and invest as well as protect everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of a family asset protection trust package, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trusts Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives both pre- and post-RV as we understand them. If you contact us, we'll be happy to send you our initial no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed with the establishment of your trust package, but you're under no obligation to do so. Has a lot of information about us, about trusts, about the currencies. You can review the package, contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. But again, if you do decide to proceed, everything you need is in the package. So let's go ahead and see what we have here in the Q&A. Our first caller is area code 603. That's 603. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Jim. How you doing? It's Don in Florida.
That's Don. How are you, my friend? Long time no hear. What's going on?
I know. I listen to calls all the time. I haven't had a chance to call in and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm doing good. How you been?
Busy as hell.
Good. Well, that's what keeps us young. We stay busy. Hey, if you remember my motorhome when we had lunch that day, I stripped that whole bus down to bare metal. I scraped it with a 2-inch scraper. I scraped all the paint off it.
Okay, I just I was going to say, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you give me that last comment again?
Okay, yeah. If you remember the motorhome, the bus we met when we went out to lunch that time, remember? Okay, well,
sir.
I stripped the whole bus down to bare metal with a 2-inch razor scraper.
Good Lord, how long did that take?
Oh, there was a few weeks, but it's a prep work that's taking the longest time because I'm doing a full repaint. But anyway, that's not what I called it out. I got a tax question about the trust, okay? When all this happens and we have some rental properties, okay, they're held by the trust. The income on the rental properties is taxed, obviously. When I draw money out of that trust account, let's say I want to go buy a new car or whatever, we pay tax on it when the trust made the profit from the rental. Am I taxed again when I draw it out for personal use then?
The way it should work is if the trust in a given quarter has paid no taxes, whatever you receive as a distribution is taxable to you, with the net that the remainder within the trust is taxed. If, however, the trust pays the tax, theoretically what they're distributing is principal, which should not be taxable. We still are waiting for the IRS response. We've been unsuccessful in getting specific written responses to this. However, once the dinar reinstitutes in country, then we're going to go to the IRS and say, look, you're going to have a problem with us if you don't answer our questions. Now that the currency's reinstituted in country, we're on a glide path to global revaluation, and our clients are perfectly willing to pay whatever the tax is, but you need to tell us what the tax is. If we cannot get the information we need from the IRS, the only thing we can tell you to do is what we're going to do. Pay an ordinary income tax on the gain and simultaneously file for a refund citing 988E2, 643A and B of the Internal Revenue Code and IRS Publication 525. That's the best we can do right now.
Yeah, you talk extensively about that. Yeah, we're clear about that. My question was, because we have a couple rental properties within the trust now, and we haven't taken anything out. The rents are just paid automatically into the trust bank account. Haven't taken anything out, and of course we'll have to pay our taxes on that. And my concern was
dividends and interest within the trust that aren't distributed are taxable to the trust.
To the trust, right? Okay. And when I take them out, it's not taxable again, though.
No, if the tax was paid, theoretically you're receiving the net. But if no tax was paid, then it's taxable theoretically to you. This is why we want the IRS to tell us, because they could confirm what I just said, or they could just give us some completely off-the-wall explanation, the way things are going with the IRS right now, I mean, anything's possible. I think
we know that.
Could be wrong. Maybe I'm getting suspicious, but I think one of the reasons that the IRS is dragging their feet is either because they haven't determined for themselves the tax, or they don't care if we are delinquent in the tax because they just as soon hit us with a 100% penalty. Perhaps they don't even want us to have the money, so who knows? Who knows what this bunch is up to in D.C. right now?
Now, when you say 100% penalties, that means, say, if you owe $10,000 of tax, they'll double that, or they take everything you have?
Well, let's say it's ordinary income. Let's say the gain's ordinary income. You're looking at 39.6% plus the 5% millionaire surtax puts you at 44.5%, plus a 100% penalty basically puts you at 90%. It would be the tax. Okay, they're not going to lose any sleep over that. They're going to pat each other on the back.
Okay, I got this.
Yeah, they're kleptocrats. They don't think it's our money. They think it's their money, and we're just allowed to have some of it.
Hey, Jim, your frustration and anguish is showing through more and more every week, and I commend you for it. You feel like we do.
You know what part of it is? Because I just want this damn thing over with. We keep getting so close, and everything they're doing is nudging us to the end of this. And I'm tired of listening to myself. I want to talk about something else.
Well, Jim, life is not going to be the same on Wednesdays without you. Because you're literally a focal point.
If I'm not here on Wednesday, it's because your ship just came in, and you're not going to.
Yeah, I know that. I know. I know that. But you seriously are a Wednesday noontime focal point every week. You have been for about 12 years. So anyway, hey Jim, it's great talking to you. Great talking to you. And we're going to meet up with you sometime. We may be going up to Pennsylvania, New Hampshire to see the grandchildren before all this stuff happens. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get together again.
Give me a holler. We'll go through lunch. Give me a holler, all right?
Beautiful. Okay, Jim. Thank you so much, buddy.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye. Our next caller is area code 801. That's 801. Go ahead.
Jim, it's Clay Blackwell. How are you?
Hey, Clay. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm just like you, though, Jim. I'm getting tired of this.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, in your opinion, what the back wall is. It seems like they keep kicking the can down the road. They're holding up their economy. They're holding up a lot of these contractors and their membership into the WTO and things of that sort. How long do you think they can push this? Some tend to think that they're on a fiscal year, which means their budget for the second half of the year would start in October. Some think they're on a calendar year, which would mean it could actually go to January, which would mean they'd completely eliminate year 23 of the 3-year budget. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, what do you think is holding this thing up?
Well, I've kind of alluded to it on my call. I think that they've got to eradicate the multiple currency system and the corruption. I think they got to eradicate that. Their fear is they're doing everything they can to collect the 3 zeros. As a matter of fact, the fact that money's pouring into the banks is a very, very good sign. But the reason Soudani is running around arresting people is because they're trying to smuggle the IQD out of the country in order to utilize the 3 zeros to exchange globally. So I think once they get a handle on that, everything else is pretty much done. That's, like I said, the money supply issue to me is moot. The economy issue to me is moot, but the corruption issue is still there. The corruption's been there since, I guess, for decades with regard to the currency, and they've got to resolve that. So, that to me is the only thing that could stop it. Now, there are some people that continue to say it's not going to happen until 2025. Well, to be completely honest, I can't say that's impossible, but I don't see practically how that can happen. Remember, they're operating in a de-dollared situation where they got to utilize the dinar. They don't have sufficient, the government does not have sufficient USD reserve currency to run the government and provide all of the other things that they're saying they're doing. There's only 2 ways they can go with this. They either reinstitute and introduce the new national currency, or they're in default. There's no middle ground there. That's where they are. mathematically.
Okay, so, I get that. I'm just wondering how long these other companies are willing to hold out before they make a move to say, hey, you guys still aren't doing anything. We're pulling out. I just wondered if there was any information on that.
If they didn't think Iraq government was making a good faith effort, they probably would want to back off. But they're watching, as I've said, they're watching Soudani, Barzani, and Alak and the directors. They're slapping the U.S. Treasury in the hand. They slap the U.S. ambassador in the hand. They're slapping the pro-Iranian officials within the coalition framework in the hand. They're slapping the Iranian merchants in the hand. They're telling Iran, no thank you, we'll handle our electric grid and all of that. So they're doing everything they can given the cards that they were dealt. And that's why I think, we're nudging in the right direction, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Do you think, Jim, that when they do revalue this thing, you said that we're still waiting on the IRS to give us a decision. The IRS isn't going to do that till this thing happens, in my opinion, because they want to get, like you said, as much money out of it as feasibly possible. So, with that said, is there any precedent for currency revaluations in the past? Is there anything to say, hey, this is long-term gain, and therefore it will be taxed as long-term gain?
I got to be honest with you. I'm a little remiss in this area. What happened with me with the Kuwaiti dinar is I purchased Kuwaiti dinar, and I exchanged them within 4 months. So it was ordinary income. So I really didn't give it that much thought. But
okay, that makes sense.
Remember, unfortunately, we're moving toward an administrative state. You remember during the COVID, the CDC was issuing. The CDC didn't have the power to just tell you what you could and couldn't do, whether you had to have. They didn't have that power, but they pretended they did. The IRS, in my opinion, is going to do the same thing. I think they're going to call the reinstitution and revaluation of the Iraqi dinar some sort of a seminal event, and the IRS is going to issue some sort of a statement saying something that's not in the code and it's not in the law, and they're going to try to do something. That's why I think they're not answering our questions. That's what I think they're doing.
So you think they can create their own tax code based on the fact that this money's revalued?
They're going to try to reinterpret statutes to fit their narrative, which is what they do with every damn thing.
Interesting.
Okay? I don't trust a bunch. I mean, look what's going on right now with the DOJ, with the FBI, with all of the other agencies. They're rogue. They're just doing what they want, and they're making people.
Well, they've got Donald Trump so tied up he can't even concentrate on his campaign. That is complete BS. I can't believe that these guys would actually get away with that. But that's what's going on.
Here's the way I look at it. I think, there are people on both sides that are just ideologically committed. There's only a small group in the middle, 10 to 15%, that are persuadable. Nothing's going on is really that helpful. So when people like you, and I say the same thing, I can't believe they're doing this. Here's the way I look at it. They must be really trying to cover up something really badly to go out on a limb like this.
Yes, they are going way out on a limb.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney, but I read that indictment, and it is absolute garbage. It's garbage. It's absolute frontal assault on the First Amendment. There's no other way to say it.
They're hitting the man with everything, including the kitchen sink.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. I mean, imagine if George Bush, imagine if a sitting president tried to do that against a Democrat. The media would be, they'd be apoplectic, and I'd agree with them. I mean, every rule is being broken by what they're doing. And that guy, what's his name? Was it Jack Smith? Is that his name?
He's the guy. He's lead counsel for the prosecution.
Let me tell you, if you know anything about body language, he was standing out there like he was naked. He was not comfortable at all. The things he was saying were absurd on their face. I mean, that doesn't mean they can't railroad this thing through, because it can happen. But I will tell you,
they did it when they tried to impeach him about Russia. That was all BS as well.
Yeah.
We probably should. You don't hear about him anymore.
Right. We probably shouldn't digress here, but here's what I think. Let's look at the worst case scenario. They drag Trump in there. They have their kangaroo court. They convict him of something absurd and ridiculous. In my personal opinion, the Supreme Court, once it goes to appeal, if it even goes as far as the Supreme Court, is going to get shot down. But if they're able to bloody the guy up to the election, they've accomplished what they wanted.
Right. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it would work in the end, and even if the trial gets pushed to after the election, then the left's argument is going to be, you really want to elect someone that should be going to jail, it's going to lose this. That's what they're doing. And, of course, they're all the while, I mean, you want to talk about a corrupt organization. The Biden family, it's absolutely, it's almost comical. It's almost comical what's going on. 170 suspicious activity reports, upwards of $50 billion that have gone through several dozen shell corporations over the last 30 years. I mean, this is like what they accused Trump of times 100.
And, I mean, and with a slap on the wrist at that.
If that. Well, they finally got a judge that had a modicum of decency who in 3 minutes destroyed that plea deal with Biden, with Hunter Biden. I mean, I mean, we could go on forever. We're probably digressing from the subject at hand, but this is exactly what the founders were afraid of. What's going on right now? The administration of an administrative state. We have career people in there that see the elected officials as just bothersome people that come and go. And Trump was a complete outsider, and he got in there, and they knew right away they had a problem with him. They tried to take him out before he even got into the White House. So
Trump's not a politician; he's a businessman.
Right.
That's all. That's
well, they know now. They know now he's up to speed on the underbelly of Washington D.C. They know it now. If he's ever back in the White House, the whole administrative state is done. They know it. They know it. That's why they've got to do what they got to do.
When he said, and I'll let you go with this, when he said in his election speech, we're going to clean the swamp, they were shaking in their boots. So they knew, we got to get rid of this guy. Yeah. And they're going to, it's unfortunate because putting the whole country through hell. And it's funny because they're alleging that he said that his statement that the election was stolen is somehow a violation of the law. Hillary Clinton would tell you that today about 2016. It's just silly. It's silly. But yeah, you're right. We got to move on. But it's going to be a very, very strange election cycle. Take care, Clay. Our next caller is area code 785. That's 785. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. Tom in Kansas.
Yes, sir.
And I wanted to ask you a question. It's probably a question that is really going to be relevant if it goes like 3-1 because we'll have plenty of money. But for people that are have retired here recently in the 62 age to, say, 67, where you can only make so much before your Social Security benefit is reduced. If this would happen at 3-1, I know that the money is not going to be an issue, but I worked my whole life to draw. If I am in that age bracket and this happens for that year, will that amount of money wipe out me being able to draw any Social Security funds for that year?
No, it won't wipe it out. No, it won't wipe it out. It'll just expose the Social Security to a tax, but it won't wipe it out because the bulk of the tax is going to be paid from the profit from the exchange. But, by the way, do you know who introduced the law to change Social Security and make it taxable?
Who?
Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah, I can believe it.
There you go. A lot of stuff goes back to him. He did a lot of damage in his 40 years, and he's just getting warmed up.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
well, we'll deal with it at that time. So I just was wanting to know.
Let's put it this way. Let's say your revaluation is $10 and your Social Security is a nickel. Would you be willing to give up that nickel today in order to get the $10?
Yeah, that was my point. Money's not going to be an issue.
I get calls all the time from people that say, but Jim, if I don't want to exchange it all, because what if I exchange it at $3 and the next day it's $3.10? I said, see, you're still letting the money control you. Don't get emotional. Don't get attached to it. If you bought currency and you got $3 for it, and now you got more money than you know what to do with, don't ever give what you've done a second thought. Live your life, enjoy what you have, and don't wring your hand. That's prior to, all our lives we work, and the precious commodity's money. We got to work in order to make money. After this revaluation, the precious commodity's time. Don't waste it wringing your hands over how much you could have squeezed out of this thing. If you walk out of the bank with $10 million when you had a net worth of $460,000, you just got made. Enjoy life. Don't do this.
Yep. Yeah, it's just like trying to guess the market if you're trying to sell a stock. I mean, sure, you sell the stock and it was $100, and the next day it went to $120. Well, you're pretty well off. It's greed, So we'll be all right. I just was curious about that 1 year that I would be hit on taxes, but like I said, it doesn't sound like it's going to be an issue. So thank you very much. Appreciate your call.
Yes, sir, Tom.
Wednesday. If it happens, like I said, I look forward to the Wednesday call every week.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to it when it happens.
Me too. Thank you.
I'm going to put on a tuxedo for that day.
You got it right. Thank you.
Should take care. All right. Our next caller is area code 805. That's 805. Go ahead.
Good morning, Jim. Enjoying the call, as always.
Sir.
3 questions for you. This gifting trust, the trust will pay the initial taxes on that, correct? On the amount in it?
No, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is you will go to the bank, you will do your exchange, all of the USD will go into the master trust bank account. The bank won't even know that you have a gift subtrust. That's just too damn much for them to even understand. You will then go back to the bank when all of that money is available for withdrawal, and you will present the gift subtrust, and you will create accounts for each of the gifted individuals. You will then transfer their proportionate share to each of their accounts, and the tax will come out of their account.
And that would be the same for the annual taxes thereafter?
That's correct. Correct.
Okay. Now, I have a bloodline trust. Now, will it be okay to put a non-bloodline person in this gifting trust?
Certainly, because the gifting trust is a standalone. As a matter of fact, because you're not the beneficiary of the gift trust, you are the settlor/trustee of that one trust. Okay, it'll even have a separate EIN number. So that trust will operate as a standalone, 100% based on how you want to manage the money, invest the money, and distribute the money to the named recipients.
Okay. And, now I take it from what you just said that only one person can be in this trust. Is that correct?
No, the settlor of the trust can be an individual, it can be a married couple, it can be 2 people that aren't even married.
No, I mean the gifting trust.
Well, the gifting, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Recipient.
The recipient could be as many. My subtrust has 15 recipients.
Oh, okay.
That means I'm going to have to create 15 subtrusts, which means I'll probably have to pay my trustee to handle this for me. And it's interesting because you can even name your trustee as a recipient in the gift subtrust. So there's there's all kinds of things we can do with the gift subtrust, but the major point of the gift subtrust, and the reason we created it initially, although there are other things that can be done, is that we created it. We had too many people contact us and say, look, I want to leave money for X, Y, or Z, but this person's disabled, this person has mental issues, this person's irresponsible, this person's a minor, whatever. So, okay, well then we'll work it out so that you can manage the money yourself for those individuals based on, what needs to be done.
Okay, great. Yeah, you've answered some very valuable questions here. I appreciate it. Aside, if you have a way where I don't have to give 50% to the government, I'd love to hear that.
Well, it theoretically could be cap gain. Remember, they refer to the profit from the exchange as cap gain. And as a matter of fact, the IRS is referring to options, currency options, as cap gain. Our argument is we are in physical possession of the currency, but I think the IRS is going to call it ordinary income. They just can't help themselves. Okay. But if they do, they do. I say to people, well, I don't want to give them that much money. Well, begin to go buy some more currency. Then do it. Mm-hmm. Work backwards and say, okay, I want $5 million after the dust settles. And if the tax is 50%, I'm going to need X amount of, dinar to net me $5 million after a 50% ordinary income tax. So, if necessary, do it that way, although I don't know if you can buy any currency now.
Yeah. The time frame that we've held it doesn't make any difference, does it? As far as which tax?
Well, the way for it to be cap gain, even if it's called cap gain, is you have to hold the currency for over a year. So I'd say 95% of dinarians, everything they own, they've had for over a year. So if their cap gain applies, they would enjoy the cap gain.
Okay, all right. And also, next question is, do you have a notary that you have on staff that takes care of a lot of your stuff? I'm just wondering, you're only one individual, and you've got a bunch of people calling you now. And
well, they have their own notary. We send them their trust package, and they get the executions done themselves. We got clients on 7 continents. There's no way we could have a notary available in every country. So when people receive their trust package, they get instructions, they get the trust, and they get a half a dozen supplemental documents. And one of the instructions includes the documents that need to be notarized and the documents that just need your signature. And that's the first thing that needs to happen, because once they're executed, the trust is legally enforced and your currencies are legally assigned to the trust. But that part the client themselves has to deal with in person. Usually they go to their bank or they can go to the clerk of the court, in their county, and their notary services there as well. And some people know notaries personally, and they get it done that way. But that's the only way it can be done.
Okay. All right. Well, just waiting on your return phone call. So anyway.
What is your first name again? I'm sorry.
Sid, S-I-D.
Oh, okay, Sid. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're on the list. I'm sorry.
Super.
Sid. Yes, sir.
Okay, real good. Thank you very much. You have a great day. Right. Appreciate the questions.
Sure, Sid. Bye-bye. Our next caller is area code 443. That's 443. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. This is Gina from Maryland.
Hey, Gina. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. When you say that we will may have to proceed or in ordinary income because we won't have direction from the IRS, you mean the trust? Do you mean the trust will have to take it as ordinary income, not me and my personal tax?
I'm saying whether your currencies are in trust or whether you were someone without a trust and the currencies are yours in title, if we don't get a response from the IRS, you have no choice but to pay the ordinary income tax and file for a refund. Because if you don't pay the tax or you pay a lesser tax, you're going to pay 100% penalty on the difference, and that could wipe you out. So as much as we hate overpaying a tax, you don't want to be faced with something of this magnitude with a 100% penalty. So we have no, I mean, that goes for me too. If we don't hear from the IRS, I'm absolutely going to pay the ordinary income tax and file for a refund. They're not going to take 44.6% away from me because I don't pay the right tax. You just can't do it, in my opinion.
So when it revalues, and we have to, so we're taking the action to exchange, but you have a trust established, and you've assigned the currencies to the trust, but you're individually you're claiming.
No, I'm saying if you have a trust, whatever the tax is, the trust must pay. If you do not have a trust, whatever the tax is, you must pay it. The problem is whether you have a trust or not, we haven't gotten confirmation about the tax status. The IRS is sufficiently ambiguous where in my opinion, we have no choice without written confirmation of the tax to pay the ordinary income tax and file for a refund.
But I'm doing that as an individual, because at that point my trust has never filed a tax return or never done anything. It's just sitting there.
So what? The first year you had a job you had to file a tax return. The first year, if the revaluation occurs within your trust, the trust has incurred a taxable event, and the trust has to pay the tax. The problem is we don't know what the tax is. So you're calculating the amount of tax that the trust would have to pay, but basing that on an ordinary income tax approach. If the IRS doesn't tell us it's cap gain, we have no choice but to pay the ordinary income tax, because if we don't and we're wrong, we have to pay 100% penalty. That's why I constantly say I want to see the revaluation in the first half of a given quarter, which gives us time to compel the IRS to tell us if the revaluation happens on or before August 15th, taxes would not be due until October 15th. That gives us 60 days to compel the IRS to tell us what the tax is. The revaluation happens on September 28th, and taxes are due on October 15th. We don't have time to compel the IRS to tell us what the tax is. So in my opinion, I'll just put it this way, in that situation, I would have no choice but to pay the ordinary income tax and file for a refund citing the sections of the code that I mentioned.
But I understand that, but I'm doing that as individually. I'm paying that ordinary income tax amount as an individual. I'm logging on to the IRS website, and I am making that payment, but as an individual, not in the name of my trust. If the transaction occurred within the trust, it's taxable to the trust. It's not taxable to you unless the money's distributed to you. Okay, so the trust is making the tax payment, but the calculation, the determination, was based on ordinary income, and you're picking the highest amount. I don't know what that is, 39.5 or 40.
If the IRS doesn't tell us different, we have to treat it as ordinary income, because we're exposing ourselves to 100% penalty if we don't.
Right. Okay. It's confusing to me when you say ordinary income, because I think of that as an individual, right? I have this trust, and it's doing. Okay.
All right. Point taken. Tax. There are tax brackets for individuals, and there are tax brackets for trusts. But ordinary income is ordinary income, whether it's the tax bracket within the trust or the tax bracket as an individual. Capital gain tax is capital gain tax, whether it's taxable to the trust or it's taxable to the individual. Now, the amounts of the brackets differ slightly between a trust or an individual, but it's the same. It's either ordinary income, it's cap gains, it's tax deferred, or it's non-taxable. If they don't tell us what it is, in my opinion, we have to treat it as ordinary income, whether it's through the trust or whether you don't have a trust and you're an individual.
So then your calculation would be ordinary income basis on whatever the value is that has of the currency that is.
Whatever the gain is.
Right. So if you got $1,000 of it in U.S. dollars, it's 1 for 1. It's $1 million. Now your trust, you're paying ordinary income tax percentage amount on that $1 million. Right?
You buy $1 million dinar for $1,000, and you get $1 million at the exchange. Whether it's ordinary income or cap gain, you're going to pay taxes on $999,000, which is the gain from the exchange.
Oh, okay.
Got it?
Because I paid $1,000. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Taxes are funny. I got to tell you a story. I probably shouldn't digress like this, but I got to tell you a story. There was a senator named Jacob Javits. He was in charge of the Watergate hearings. And this occurred in my early 20s. And at the time, I was working in D.C., and I had to go to this law firm for a piece of business. And they said, Jim, and we were crunching numbers and doing math, and someone said, Jim, we got a problem. Can you help us out? And I said, sure. They said, we have an attorney here that we're having a hell of a time trying to explain to him the difference between simple and compound interest. Would you mind helping him out? I said, sure. So he take me into this beautiful office, and here's this old gentleman sitting there. Typical, he's wearing his blue pinstripe suit with his red bow tie and his big old glasses, and very kind gentleman. And I'm explaining to him the difference between simple and compound interest. And I look down and see the nameplate, and I say, oh, my God, it's freaking Jacob Javits. I'm sitting here explaining compound and simple interest. The only point bringing this up is the math in terms of interest, compound interest, simple interest, taxation and all that. It can be complicated. It's not something that we do all of the time. And, accountants, I jokingly say accountants' job is to be precisely wrong instead of approximately right. It's always a moving target, and it's something we got to work with. But with regard to this revaluation, the only way I can say it is unless we get written confirmation to the contrary, we have to pay the ordinary income tax because, again, if we don't, we're looking at 100% penalty. And if you've lost sleep waiting for this thing to happen, you're going to lose a lot of sleep if you lose it all because of the tax code. And we don't want that to happen to anyone. So our next caller here is area code 810. That's 810. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim, this is Stan. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sam?
Stan, S-T-A-N.
Oh, Stan. Yes, sir.
Hey, look, could you send me a list of those the state banks that's with the digital currency?
I can give them to you. There's only 3 right now that are pursuing it: Texas,
okay,
Arizona, and Montana.
Okay, so it's not in place right now.
They're working on it right now, and I brought it up because when I received information about it, because I was looking at ways to circumvent the central bank digital currency, one of the thoughts that I had was we're going to transition to income-producing tangible assets. Now, the interest, of course, would be involved in the central bank digital currency, but none of the principal. But now that there are states that are trying to circumvent it, it makes sense to set up our trust bank accounts, transfer money to those banks because we'll be outside of the central bank digital currency system. We'll have ATM. We'll have cards, credit cards, and debit cards, so we can function on a day-to-day basis as though the bank's down the street.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure I was thinking right because let's say if that was already in place and that was in one of those states, that's where you would do your change, correct?
Well, you don't have to do your exchange there. You can always transfer the money there. The objective, again, is one thing. avoid the central bank digital currency, the credit score system. In my opinion, I don't see how the central bank digital currency can fly because to me it's a grotesque violation of the Fourth Amendment. But the left constantly does things that are unconstitutional. This administration's gotten blown up in the Supreme Court with the stuff that they've done, and they won't stop because their objective, they know that if they can amend or repeal any of the amendments, particularly anything in the Bill of Rights, in their view, it makes it all negotiable. And they're probably not wrong about that. So we just got to do what we got to do.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, look, I got a few questions. What am I do? I'm going to call back in and schedule a day back and talk to you, on a personal note. Okay, appreciate it.
Give me a call, okay? All right, take care, Stan.
All right, you bet.
Bye-bye. Okay, our next caller is area code 509. That's 509. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim, can you
yes.
hear me? I'm sitting out of my desk. This is Art.
Well, speak up a little bit.
Yeah, let me put it on speaker if I can. I've got on my earbuds. Forgive me. There it is. Come on. Is that any better?
I can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Of course, we are very fortunate to have gotten a trust from you folks, and I've looked at very closely initiating a gift trust, and the challenge I have is that when I initiated and received the EIN number for your trust, the IRS charged me like $300.
Okay, you were not dealing with the IRS. You were dealing with someone claiming to be the IRS. I tell people all the time, there is no charge for an EIN number. The moment that you see it, there's a charge. Get out of that site and don't even get right back into your computer. Just it's like an Etch-a-Sketch. Just shake it away and go back later. Don't play with it. That's just someone. You might get an EIN number, but you shouldn't have to pay a dime for it.
Yeah, I did receive an EIN number, and that was okay. So based on that, I should be able to go ahead and get the gift trust, which I have a need for, and then make sure that I'm talking to the IRS themselves.
Yes.
And
well, like as soon as you
get
it, as long as you haven't paid them, just get out of that site.
Yeah, I thought, well, maybe under this current administration, they're doing anything they can to be able to take in monies. Well, that may or may not have been true, but I still ended up at it.
Well, there's always going to be scammers out there. It's just that unfortunately the federal government's become one of them.
Yeah, may not be right, but it's correct. All right, Jim. Well, thank you. I will proceed then to get the EIN for the gift trust and make sure. I don't know what recourse I have with the amount that I paid previously to this for your trust.
Unfortunately, it's not enough money that's worth weeks of your time, probably.
Right, but I did get an EIN number. I guess I should check and make sure that it's a valid EIN number.
I was just going to say the protocol. They should have sent you an EIN certificate that had all of the relevant information on it, along with the number. In other words, who's the settlor, who's the trustee, who's the primary beneficiary, what was the date that was ascertained, and what's the number.
Okay, fair enough.
Right.
And go back on the date. All right. Thank you kindly, sir. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for the call. You're awesome.
Certainly. Thanks so much. Our next caller is area code 757. That's 757. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim. This is Michael. I'm from Virginia.
Yes, sir.
I have a question in reference to domicile. I live in Virginia. Could I domicile the trust in another state, or is that legal or illegal?
In order to domicile in another state, you're going to have to substantively explain why that's the case. You can't just do it because you want to. I'm thinking you're trying to domicile it in Wyoming, and if so, in order to avoid state tax. Is that correct?
Yeah, Wyoming or Florida. Yeah, you're correct.
Right. Now, by doing that, you've made it extremely cumbersome to do so. In addition, there are 8 states, so I would not recommend it. In addition, there are 8 states which say doesn't matter where the entity is domiciled. If you as a resident of this state are receiving income, you're going to pay the state tax. And, of course, not coincidentally, it's the high tax states, California, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, possibly Virginia, just the higher tax states, North Carolina, stuff like that. So it's probably not going to work in the states that do the most damage anyway, but it makes the thing a little cumbersome. Believe me, no one likes writing a check to the IRS, but after this revaluation, it's true that you're going to be probably writing a larger check than you've ever written, but it's also true that you have a hell of a lot more left than you've ever had. So, I say to people, when this thing happens, do 3 things. Thank the Lord, pay your taxes, invest wisely. Don't second-guess those things, because if you got currencies, you're in good shape, and you don't want to gum up the works by trying to make an extra nickel out of the deal.
Okay. Now, I know you touched on it last week a little bit. Some companies are recommending that you domicile in another state, and you said something about don't listen to them. You're going to end up going to jail, something like that.
Well, there are people saying that there's no tax because it's a currency exchange. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're going to jail. There are people that say if you domicile in Wyoming, for example, you're exempt from state tax because you're in a non-tax state. That's not true for 8 states, and the IRS is going to give those people a call, or not the IRS, but the state revenue department is going to give those people a call. Those people are going to refer them to the individual that told them they don't have to pay a state tax. The state's going to call them, and the states are going to call feds, and it's going to get ugly. So that's why I say it's ordinary income until the IRS tells us otherwise.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye now. Our next caller is area code 817. That's 817. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. This is Rose.
Hey, Rose.
We've been missing each other. You call me, I call you, and we can't come together here. It's been a long time since we got our trust. It was, 11 years ago. And I know there's a lot of changes, and I just wanted to ask you, I know that there's things that we need to do that we haven't done, and I have not been listening to the calls, and I'm embarrassed that I haven't, but we've had a lot of health problems. We've had, anyway, I can't go into all that, but so I was wondering if maybe you, when you have time, if you could give me a call, because I have so many questions it would take up too much time on the phone now.
Hold on. Let me write your phone number down. I'm going to give you a call this afternoon. Are you going to? Are you going to be home between now and say 5 o'clock?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay, you will hear from me between now and 5 o'clock today.
Oh great. Okay, thank you so much. I'll be sure and answer the phone.
Hey, Rose.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye bye.
Okay, Rose. Bye bye. Okay, our next caller is area code 208. That's 208.
Yes, Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
This subject of taxation has been beat to death today, so I'm not going to prolong my question on that. You've been very clear, but I just want to reemphasize for people in dollars what you've described today and in every previous call is that at a 1-to-1 rate, that 44.5 or 0.6% is $4,460,000. That's a lot of cash. So that's the tax debt, correct?
I'm not quite sure what you're saying. At 1-to-1, if you have 10 million dinar, that's $10 million, which you
correct.
pay $1,000, which you pay $10,000 for. So you're looking at tax on the balance. And you're right.
Yeah.
That's how much it would be. That's how much.
That's $4,460,000.
Right. However, that's where the post-RV planning comes into place. There are a number of things you can do. You can invest in real estate where you'll have capital expenditures and depreciation. You can take care of all your charitable giving, which reduces the tax exposure dollar for dollar. You can also establish something called a charitable remainder trust. The money would go to the charitable remainder trust. That amount of money would not only would that amount of money not be taxed because it's gone to the charity, but a charitable remainder trust means that the charity will get the corpus when you pass away. In the meantime, all of the income generated to you is tax-free. So there are a number of things we can do to reduce the tax exposure. What we can't do is ignore the fact that there is a tax exposure and lose half of the money due to that. So that's the problem we're trying to overcome. And there's a personal reason for this. When this happens, someone that has our trust or someone that's listened to our call is going to erroneously say that we said there's no tax or the tax is this or the tax. No. We're going to be able to go back and say, you pick any damn phone call you want. You look at any email you want. We've made it crystal clear. Unless the IRS tells us otherwise in writing, you have to treat it as ordinary income and file for a refund, citing the sections of the code that suggest otherwise.
And I have no dispute with anything you're saying. I'm glad you talk about how we can offset this debt with the intelligent things that you just brought out. I just want to emphasize
what I'm going to do personally is I'm in Knoxville right now. My intention is to move to Asheville, North Carolina, where I once lived. I love the place. I miss the place. They got a 9% sales tax, so that's $90,000 in state sales tax on every million I get from the revaluation. I love the place, but not $90,000 per million. So I'm going to stay in Knoxville till this is over. But I am immediately going to be purchasing a number of their mission-style 2- and 3-bedroom homes that I love there, refurbish them, and rent them out. I will have capital expenditures. I will have depreciation, and I can expand on that by buying more properties with the profit from the rents. That's the way I'm going to do it. And I'm also going to make sure that all the money goes where it goes to a bank in a state that does not have a central bank digital currency. So right now it's simple. You set up your trust, you assign the currencies to it, and you wait. After the revaluation, that's when we'll have the money and we'll have the time, but that's when all the heavy lifting occurs in order to get a good return on your money to legitimately and legally reduce the tax exposure that we're all going to have.
Yeah. No, I think I appreciate that. I know that people have got to be taking that serious, including myself. So we're just not throwing out tax money with no intelligent deductions or investments. The other thing I was going to say, the only thing we have absolutely no control of is what the IRS says the tax on the gain from the exchanges. We have no control of that. What we do have control of is how we invest the money and how we take advantage of legitimate ways to reduce our tax exposure. That we can control. Yeah, absolutely. But I want to reemphasize what you said, though, is at this juncture in time, people need to be looking at the simple math and planning accordingly. If you're going to buy additional, if you can, currency, by all means get it done. Do it. to offset these ratios that you're talking about.
Right. Well, like I said,
does that make sense? Yeah.
I say to people, well, look at the worst. Assume a 50% tax, and then ask yourself, how much do you want when this is all done? If your answer is $5 million, then you have to do some estimates based on what you think you say. Okay, base it on $3. Okay, I think I'm going to get $3 for my dinar. How much dinar do I need at 50% tax to net me $5 million? And that's how you would work backwards to determine how much currency you should have. Yeah.
Sure. And to be conservative, just for the sake of being conservative, if that's the case, so that, we're not dealing with a panacea.
Right.
Anyway, Jim, I really appreciate what you do. I'm not going to prolong this any longer today, but thank you, my friend. God bless you, and carry on.
Same to you, my friend. You take care.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Our next caller is area code 931. That's 931. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim. Good afternoon. It's Manny from Tennessee.
Yes, sir. I thought I recognized that number.
Question I have for you. They've been talking about in the budget that they're going to open up that budget, but it's going to be like a time release on the amount that's going to go out to the public. I don't know if I can explain it correctly, but my question would be if let's say the budget comes out and it's going to be 1-to-1 on the first go around, and then in 6 months to a year, they're saying as the economy grows, besides just the oil sales, it could go up to $1.50, $2, and it's going to be a 3-year budget, so they're going to go up in increments on the amount of money as Iraq gets back into the economy, so to speak. So my question is, if it does that way, how is the tax going to be? Are we going to pay on let's say you had 10 million dinars on the first go around, it's $1 to dollar. Is that going to be the final taxes we're going to be paying?
Okay.
Or is it as it floats up?
I understand what you're saying. Okay, two things. First, I think the idea that it's going to take 3 years to get to 322 is absolute crap. That's just my opinion. But as I mentioned before, the currency was at 322. The Kuwaiti dinar is at 325. The wealth of Iraq dwarfs that of Kuwait. And the idea that they're going to try to function with the U.S. reserve currency, which isn't enough, and not fully reinstitute and put their currency on the Forex. Once the currency reinstitutes in country, it's going on the Forex. There's no way it's not going back to 322 in a hurry, in my opinion. Makes absolutely no sense to me at all. The math, the momentum, all of that. And the other issue is this. Section 988E2 of the Internal Revenue Code says that the tax is due when the rate of the currency, the exchange rate changes. So if it goes to $1, we have to pay taxes on all of the currency we have at $1. So let's make a worst case scenario. Let's say it's ordinary income. It's 44.6%. We got 10 million dinar. It comes back at $1. We got to pay $446,000 in taxes. So we got to exchange at least half of the currency just to pay the tax and leave us with nothing, on the theory that it's going to increase in value at some point in time in the future. I just don't see that happening. I think that the budget and what happens on the Forex are two unrelated issues. And I think what's going to drive the value is not incremental increases micromanaged by the Iraqi government, but by what happens on the Forex. And I could be wrong. My opinion is it's going to scream to get back to 322. And if the Kuwaiti dinar is at 325, the Iraqi dinar should probably be 425.
Yeah, because it's going to be kind of crazy if they go up in increments, and we pay the tax on the 1-to-1, and then it goes up in 6 months to $2. And would it? How's that going to work? $3 and $4.
Our income tax has nothing to do with the incremental increases and decreases of a currency that we hold. Our income tax payments due on the IRS code. And Section 98082 of the code says, if the profit from the exchange exceeds $200, you must pay the tax. That's what it says.
If it goes up $1 and we exchange that's the tax we're going to pay. But
the point
we have
is,
$10 million.
The point is, by having to pay the tax at $1, we're losing the future increases because the tax is due now, irrespective of what the currency does tomorrow.
Let's see. That was very confusing. That was very confusing to me. How's that going to work?
It's not going to work well at all.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Frankly, that would suck, But I'm not saying that it's possible that could happen. I just don't see it. Again, I think once the dinar reinstitutes, it goes on the Forex, and it's the Forex, not the CBI, that will then determine the global value, in my opinion.
Well, we'll stand by. We'll be looking for that.
Why put it on the Forex at all if the actual value is based on edicts from the CBI? Then why is it on the Forex at all? It's on the Forex to compare against other currencies. That's the whole point.
Yeah, it's kind of ludicrous how they're trying to go about it. And going to Washington in a delegation sometime this week to try to get that ironed out with, who, our favorite cowboy, Joe Biden.
Yeah. Right. Well,
thanks for taking my call, Jim. I appreciate it, guy.
Yes, sir. You take care. Okay, our next caller is area code 763. That's 763. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim. This is Monty, the other Monty, from Minnesota. How are you doing today?
Yes, sir. You're not Monty Python.
Exactly. Basically, my question was almost identical to the previous gentleman before me. And I don't know if you recall, I was the last individual that asked you a question last week about this, and unfortunately it's about taxes. And, you said, well, you're going to be avoiding taxes and all your money is going to go back, pay for fines, and obviously we don't want to do that. So what the gentleman asked did clear up some things, but how do I describe this? Because I think there's a lot of confusion with a lot of your customers as to, like, when it first comes back and revalues, if it doesn't value at like 322, it say it first comes out at $1 hypothetically, but then we must have X amount of days to go in and exchange, I would assume, and we need to exchange within a quarter that it revalues. Is that correct, Jim?
No. Let's say the dinar comes back at $1 on September 15th, and the quarter ends. How many days in September? 30, 31. I can't remember. Okay, whatever the value of the dinar is on the last day of the quarter represents your taxable gain, which tax is due and must be paid by October 15th. Doesn't matter whether you've exchanged the currency or not. Whatever it's worth when you do exchange it, or whatever it's worth at the end of the quarter, if you have not exchanged it, is basis for the tax, which is due on the 15th day of the first month of the next quarter.
That clears up, I think, a lot of the confusion. Wonderful. And the last question I had, thank you for clarifying that. I think that does help substantially. When you go and apply for your EIN number, on there, it says the date the trust was funded, would that be the date that you got it notarized, or the date that the currency revalued?
It's okay. Let me explain something to you. The United States computer system, the government's computer system, in my opinion, is an absolute embarrassment. The last what happened with the Obamacare, it took a bunch of middle schoolers to clean it up. They paid $100 million, and it was garbage. Now, let's say in most other countries, they have something called an EIN, employee ID number, and a TIN, a trust ID number. So if you live in Canada, you apply for a trust number. You don't have any of these questions. The reason it's complicated for our EIN is because they use the EIN term for things that aren't businesses. That's why they ask, is this a business trust? No. Is this an estate trust? No. Do you have employees? No. Then they ask the question, the funding date. It's an arbitrary date. The only thing you do with that question is make sure you give them a date in the quarter you're applying. If you give it, because it's a fictitious number, if you give them a date in the previous quarter, you will get an EIN number. You'll get a tax return for that quarter in 6 weeks.
Oh my God! Oh geez.
Why did you give him a bad date?
No, I haven't, because you said don't apply for a number until it revalues.
Here's what you do. Send me an email. Say, Jim, I need the EIN protocol. I have it all written out, every question they ask and how you answer it. So if you will be kind enough to just drop me an email today, Jim, I need the EIN protocol. I'll return it to you. Just follow the instruction. You shouldn't have any problem.
Yeah. Also, do you have floating around, I don't know about floating around, but a document for bank instructions, or was that part of our
it's called the EIN. It's called the exchange protocol. You want the EIN protocol and the exchange protocol. Ask for those two things. I'll get them right up to you.
Is there anything else in that email that I should request, or is that
it? If that covers the two things of concern, no. But if there's something else, you know how to get a hold of me. It's much better to email. Excuse me?
Yep, I said that sounds good.
Okay. All right, Monty.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Yep.
Well, Monty was our last caller. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to our call. I thought it was a good call, productive. The things we've discussed are of interest, and you're a new caller, you haven't at least gotten our initial no-obligation package, I would strongly suggest you contact us to do so. Our website is trustswithunlimitedllc.com. Our email address is trustswithunlimitedllc@gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. Contact us by phone or email. We'll be happy to assist you in every way. Our next call is, of course, scheduled for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great week.